Hey everyone, this is Tim. There's only about a week to go until the Tonebenders London Sound Design Meetup presented by the Motion Picture Sound Editors. So listeners in the UK, mark it down for Sunday, August 24th at 7 p.m. We'll be in Soho at the Crown and Two Chairmen. So come on out and have a great evening with the sound community in London. We are also in the last day or two to participate in the Listener Field Recording Stories episode. Send in the tale of your favorite recordings, and you could win a pair of O-Mini microphones. You have until August 15th to submit. That's like tomorrow. We have some fun stories already, but there's always room for more. So get your story in ASAP. Full details for both the London Sound Design Meetup and how to participate in the Listener Field Recording Stories can be found at tonebenderspodcast.com. Finally, I'll be covering the Toronto International Film Festival this year, so if you have worked on a film or you will be in town for the festival, let me know and I'll do my best to check out the film, and it'd be great to see you. I'm glad you tuned in for this episode. We finally get to talk about the iconic sounds of the Star Trek franchise. When I was growing up, Star Trek was a regular fixture in our home, so I'm super happy I finally get to talk about it on Tonebenders. So let's get to it. You're listening to Tonebenders Sound Design Podcast, presented by Sound Ideas. Sound Ideas' highly anticipated mid-year sale has been extended for a limited time. Unlock 50% off on thousands of premium recordings from epic cinematic sounds to authentic ambiances. They're ideal for any creative project. This applies to all Sound Ideas proprietary libraries. With over 45 years of experience, Sound Ideas delivers audio trusted by professionals worldwide. Head over to soundideas.com to learn more. Hello, my name is Tim Muirhead, and I'm going to be hosting for today's talk. I'm not entirely sure how it's possible, but Tonebenders has done 322 episodes before getting to talk about sound design on Star Trek. It seems like that should have been episode 4, so I'm not really sure why this has happened this way, but I'm super excited, and today we're going to prove that it will be worth the wait, as I have two people with me today that between them have worked on more than 150 episodes of series within the Star Trek franchise. So they know about the sound of the Star Trek universe, maybe better than anyone else on Earth, who knows. First up, we have Michael Schapiro, who has worked on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Star Trek Picard, Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Short Treks, and most recently, the film Star Trek Section 31. He has been either the sound designer or supervising sound editor, or sometimes both, on these various series. It's wonderful to meet you, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Hi, good to be here. Thank you for the warm introduction.
No problem. Joining Michael is James Lucero, who has been the supervising sound editor on Star Trek Lower Decks for 5 seasons, bravely taking Star Trek into the animated realm. Thanks for coming on the show today, James. It's great to make your acquaintance.
Timothy, great to meet you. Really appreciate you having me.
So right off the top, let's recognize that both of you are nominated for Emmys this summer for your work in the Star Trek universe, Star Trek franchise. James for Season 5 of Lower Decks for Best Sound Editing for an Animated Program, and Michael for Section 31 for Best Sound Editing in an Anthology, Movie, or Special category. So congratulations to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Although this is not a new situation for either of you to find yourselves in, as you both have multiple Star Trek-related Emmy nominations in your back pockets. So let's just take this all in stride for right now. There are very few franchises with the long history and the rabid fan base that Star Trek has built up over the years since the original series premiere in 1966. Do you approach Star Trek projects with any reverence for that in mind, or do you just take it like any other project with a blank slate that you have to fill sound in?
Oh, no. Definitely not a blank slate. I mean, there's some blank slate in there, yes, but no, we are trying to honor what came before as much as we can, and we'll try and update and enhance things just so that they don't feel like they're from 1967 quite so much anymore. But it's very much trying to keep things recognizably Star Trek for sure. Whether that's reusing old alarm sounds or enhancing them, you can make a number of different alarms just from slowing or speeding things up. Beeps, all that kind of stuff. We will try and pull as much as we can from what has been done before historically. I've said in, my my brain always goes to this sort of archaeological sound design of thinking, well, this is a sound from the original series, and that was in 1967, so they might have had a Moog or a Buchla or something like that. So I'm going to try and lean more towards that type of effect to use on things rather than something new and, spectral and fancy. That kind of thing. It's multi-layers of trying to respect what has come before in Star Trek and, put our own new spin on things where we can.
And to add on top of that, I couldn't have had more reverence to be asked to do this. I remember when we found out, it was probably about 3 months before we started the first episode, and we started prepping for it right away. We asked for the archive of sounds from Star Trek, and we knew we were going to have to use them. But that was one of our first conversations: is how can we add to this? How can we add to the fidelity of what's been given to us to update everything? And there were conversations with showrunner Mike McMahon about that, how much we really need to stay within the framework of those sounds. Mike, you and I, we talked about this. We will get emails about that. The
Yes.
Fans know what these iconic sounds are. And so
the phaser charge sound was from this season, but the firing sound was from this season. Why did that happen?
Absolutely. That's true. Yep. That's true. And so Lower Decks takes place during Next Generation era. So we used primarily all Next Generation sounds when we had to. But going back to the reference, also, I grew up, my father was the biggest Trekkie. I was old enough to see the original Star Trek animated series. I think it was from 75 or 76, something like that. So I was beyond floored when we found out we got to do this. Definitely felt honored to do it. And I wanted to honor these sounds and the Star Trek franchise. I guess that's everything, be able to contribute for this series.
Yeah, I'm not quite old enough to have seen the original series when it was airing, but we watched Next Gen as family dinner time, basically, whenever it was on. When I got the chance to work on Star Trek, it was sort of oh, this is awesome, because I love the shows that I've seen. It was certainly a huge opportunity, and beyond excitement, also a little bit of terror. We can't screw this up. There's a responsibility along with the reverence.
2 years ago, 2 projects that you were both working on within the Star Trek universe, so Star Trek Lower Decks and Star Trek Strange New Worlds, did a crossover episode. Did the sound teams cross over at all? Was there any interaction between you two for that?
We actually did. We had more exchanging of sounds, as I remember. We email each other. I'm trying to remember because that was...
We emailed a bit, we were asking, because we weren't quite sure how the division of things was going to play out, I think, at first.
That's right.
Because there was an animated section of that episode, and there was a lot of live-action animated stuff. I think we'd initially just said, we wanted to get whatever Lower Decks sounds, so we're honoring what Lower Decks sounds like if we're going to be doing this. And I think it played out that you guys actually did the animated sequences.
Right, that's what we did. And then we gave you sessions, correct?
And we played a little bit back and forth, I think, because I did the sound of that portal. So there was that sort of overlap, was that particular sound of this thing that needs to both play in the animated world and in the real world. But that was a hugely fun episode to do. That one was just so much fun, and I think the fans really enjoyed it too.
Yeah, when you're going between live action, animation, and trying to get a feel that's flowing, that can be difficult, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges, and I think it was definitely achieved.
Yeah, I think it was universally given a big thumbs up. It was a super fun episode and a good episode as well. You both mentioned that you grew up with Star Trek. I thought I'd just interject with my quick story. I grew up with an older sister who is a major Star Trek fan. And in the 90s, when the last episode of The Next Generation aired, I live in Toronto, they played it in the Sky Dome, which is our big baseball stadium. And we went down and we watched it in the stadium with literally probably 35,000 people or whatever it was. Wow. And everyone was dressed up, and it was just like this big Star Trek party.
What did you dress as?
Yeah. I dressed as a ninth grader, but my sister was dressed up. She was in college at the time, and she went with all of her college friends who were all dressed up, and they brought me along with them for fun. So that I was grateful for that, but I just wanted to throw in my weird little Star Trek stories as well. In Section 31, and also the 5th season of Lower Decks, there are 2 kind of plots that are very similar where a rift in space opens up. and we're forced through plot mechanisms to fly into the rift. And you both kind of tackled these kind of space storms, electrical fields a little bit differently. Maybe we can talk about the idea of designing an electrical field and how you approached it.
Yeah. What does that really sound like in space? None of us know. So, of course, we're looking at the visuals. We're looking at the animation. That's one way we start. We're talking to Mike McMahon. He's not giving us absolute specifics of what he wants in terms of sound layers, but he is giving us terms like frantic, chaos. I asked, are we saying impending doom? And he says, yes, let's lean towards that. Because we're going to end, which I love, we end with hope at the end of episode 10. So before that, this frantic and chaos of these fissures in space, we really went at it. We tried a lot of different layers. I was recording a lot of polarity with a friend of mine, trying to get the right electrical sound, so it wasn't just the typical Jacob's ladder that maybe could be used. But we're using some things that are similar. I have a tremendous amount of library of sounds that I have from years past. I'm trying that. I'm using frequency shifters a lot for something like that because we have to be aware of the scope of the music. The score is going to be really wide. It's Star Trek and it's Chris Westlake, and he's fantastic. So we're trying to find something, a fissure in the universe. It's going to be wide as well, but we need to fit it somehow within the score itself. We would do 2 mix previews. So we would try to discover or find out whether frequencies were being masked, what we were using for these fissures and these energy fields to what's being played by Chris Westlake. So sometimes we'd have to readjust depending on the scene and depending on the music. We found these certain layers that I was eventually able to create something similar to a shepherd's tone that was very rising, but it was very much on the lower end. So it wasn't something you heard distinctly. It was more felt.
You'd mentioned shepherd tones before, and I love a shepherd's tone. And there's tricks to do things with kind of turning any sound into a shepherd's tone, which I like to play with sometimes, but I don't think we used any of that for the big portal. We tend to, or at least I tend to, make a lot of strange electrical sounds in Star Trek. We have space lightning bolts and electricity that's definitely not the 60 hertz analog sine wave based, or 50 hertz if you're European. And so trying to get that electrical feeling without 60 hertz, which is, people may not realize that that's a huge part of the sound that makes you think this is electricity, can be challenging, and trying to get a spark that really feels like it's hitting you in the face or in the chest. I've lost track of the number of tricks that I've come up with over the years of making a cool spark or making a really big, crazy electrical field with lots of movement that can cut through the music where it needs to and keeps you kind of at the edge of your seat. And this is a really dangerous thing. Like, don't touch that. It's a live wire, that kind of thing. I will use a lot of kilohertz, snap heap, and those kinds of things because it's really easy to build up your own kind of custom effects chain in it with a lot of modulation options. So James mentions polarity, which reminds me of Mattia Celato, and hopefully I'm not butchering his name because he is he's been on the show before, so yeah. Recordist, yeah. He has a library called Polarity with these leather belt snaps in it that are amazing for electricity bases.
I'm going to have to check that out.
Oh, it's great. I love that library. And they're wide frequency range. They've got a good amount of low end. They've got a good amount of high end. There's not much effect on them, it feels like. So they're a very good basis to build off of and build things around. So things like that, crinkling bags, anything that...
Yeah, wax paper.
Yeah.
Wax paper helps, yeah.
The other thing I like to do is take things that really are not something you would expect to use in a particular sound and just kind of mangle it until it fits. I have a few recordings of myself just going that kind of thing. And then, you can process that to the point of not necessarily unintelligibility, but it really doesn't quite sound like that, but you're keeping the character and the emotion of it. And that helps so much in getting an interesting sound and something that cuts through the music and feels unique to have those little strange layers. So birds, strange dogs, an actor earlier in the show screaming randomly, things like that. You can take and you can, run compressors and distortion units and all pass disperser filters, that kind of thing. And you can get really crazy, wild stuff out of it. That's the kind of stuff that I just enjoy. Like, I get to play for a few hours of like, let's see if I can turn this thing into this thing and hope that it works.
Those happy accidents are everything.
Yes.
Always looking for those surprises.
Mike, do you want to talk about within the plot of Section 31 near the end while they're in this rift? I'm not sure if rift is the right word, but the space storm energy field. There's also a second layer of energy of the one ship sending like kind of electrical tractor beams to control like a puppet another ship. And those beams sound really cool.
Is that the garbage scow?
Yes.
Yes. That particular ship was fun to make, and it was another one of those sort of team effort things. I think Kip Smedley, who is usually our sound editor on Strange New Worlds, did the first pass at that. And then Andrew Twite, who is our Star Trek Discovery and Starfleet Academy sound editor, took a stab at it, and we mixed those together, and I did some stuff. So we all had a bit of a hand in those tractor beams, which kept changing VFX how they were going to work. Oh, yeah. It started as more of a field that would just kind of pull stuff, and then it turned into beams that were kind of rocketing out all over the place. So it was a lot of collaboration and getting things to fit with the new picture and kind of massaging things that we'd done before for it into the new space that it needed to occupy was different from all the other sounds going on at the time. So everything needs to have their own kind of key frequency so that you can pretty quickly catch that's that thing, that's over there.
The key frequencies is interesting because it can also help focus the picture. When you have the different kinds of sounds in different areas, you can pull them up and down and make the eyeball go to different spots with sound, which is always a fun way to manipulate the viewer.
Oh, yeah. We like to play with that.
Well, I guess, James, you mentioned earlier that you watched a bit of Star Trek, the animated series, which was in the 70s. The live-action version of Star Trek has continued to evolve over time with various series up until now, but there's like a 35, 40-year gap between animated series. Did you reference that original series at all, or did you just jump in?
There were a couple of moments, actually, and I can't remember. It might have been for season 2, where we did actually have to go back and watch a specific episode that was from the animated series, and it had to do, I think, with a creature that also had this sort of energy field, but there really wasn't a lot of sound design going on in the animated series. Again, music was more taking the role for the sound design. So we would reference past episodes, whether it was the animated series, whether it was Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. And at times there might not be an actual sound for a specific object or creature. So that's when we would talk to Mike McMahon about it. Okay, what are we thinking for this object or creature? And so we would give him options, throw him some quick times with what we've come up with, and he would come back, yes, no, can we do a little bit of this? Can we do a little bit of that? So a lot of collaboration with the showrunner. And again, within our own team, it was difficult because we started Star Trek during COVID. So we're scrambling, getting all our equipment out of the studio. We're going home with it. Now we have this new series. We got to come up with systems and protocols to be able to keep up. And everyone just dug their heels in, like, we're going to get this right. And we would be up very late nights, passing things between each other. Going back to what your question, like, did I reference the animated series? Not really. So we were given a lot of carte blanche for any references to older sounds. Now, if there were sounds specifically in the archives, we definitely had to use those without question. And we did. And it was always fun, like looking at those sounds, listening, trying to, use our own frequency shifters to get close enough or to find things that we could layer underneath to fill up higher and lower frequencies.
Have you found that with the animated series, you have to approach things differently than the archive sounds? Like, do they work in animation all the time, or?
Our style, I would say, we are trying to go for that cinematic feel, even if it is 2D animation. This is an epic series. It's Star Trek. any action series, I really am trying to go for that cinematic feel, unless they want to bring it down for comedy's sake. But for Lower Decks, I was treating it like it would be hopefully shown in a theater, but still understanding that it's an adult animated series, but people nowadays, they could be listening on their earbuds, listening on their computers. So we really also need to make sure that everything that we're putting in, especially low end, we got to make sure that it's going to come through on computer speakers or, low end monitors.
Somebody's iPhone.
Yeah. Right.
Built-in speakers.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have to be cognizant of that. Sure, we want to rumble the stage during playback, but we're still going to listen, down on some near fields or, a sound bar. So we want to make sure that everything is cutting through.
Most of the audience for the live action shows too are not watching it in a super tuned Dolby certified mixing stage. They're watching it at their home theater system or their laptop. So yeah, you can't lean too heavily on things like the LFE channel because it may not exist in a lot of these places.
So true. Like a lot of times I'll cut on stereo so I can make sure that it's coming through, and I will play on low end speakers as well. What I've cut, is this going to convey the feel that I'm hoping I've created for this moment? And if it's not coming through on the low end speakers, I have to go back and kind of figure out what to do in that moment.
So, Mike, in section 31, near the beginning, there's a real standout sequence for the sound design where there's a fight with two people who are out of phase with the rest of the room that they're in. This is a plot device. You take a phase shifter, I guess. I think there's a name for it. I can't recall. Yeah. But whatever that little disc is attached to goes out of phase with the rest of the room. And so if you're holding something, well, you have that. Someone else in the room can't take it from you. Their hand just goes through it.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, someone else enters the room that is also out of phase, and a fight sequence happens, and it is really cool sounding. Do you want to talk about building the sound of people who are out of sync with their surroundings?
That was another heavily collaborative effort, that whole sequence. I know Andrew Twite did the first pass on the phase shifting type of stuff. Him and Kip, I think, both did versions of that. And then I took it and tweaked it a bit. We all kind of attached our own thoughts to it. But I think that phase sound, because it's this kind of judder sound, and it's one of those things, like you can wave your hand around like that, and it's not making a sound, but you get a feeling of that vibration. Couldn't tell you what the bass sound was, but a kilohertz snap heap with maybe a distortion unit and some gain, maybe a bit of a frequency shifter, linked to an LFO, all moving together. And you can get that kind of shuddery feeling, and then you can get a lot of control beyond that of shaping the whole sound so that you get a kind of a when they're going through a thing or a thing is going through them. That was just a really fun sequence to cut. We had those two fighting out of phase, and sometimes their phase pods or whatever they were called were running out of battery at some point. Sometimes they're back in real space. Sometimes they're out of phase with each other. Sometimes they're in phase with each other. Motion is a huge part of keeping a sound interesting. You never want something to stay just the whole way through because you'll tune it out. Kilohertz is great because the modulators that you have access to are varied, but you can apply the same curves to multiple effects in series or in parallel. And so you can get really weird stuff that feels cohesive. So you can have a little bit of a random motion for something, and that'll give it a little bit more of an organic flavor to things so it doesn't sound so quantized. And then you can have a whole sweeping arc of the whole thing, changing the speed of an LFO and changing the speed of this random thing and changing the depth of this LFO, how it affects this other thing. It's very, very cool to be able to tweak not even necessarily layers of the sound, but aspects of the sound.
Mike, wouldn't you say that warping and movement of sound I think has always been a part of the sort of Star Trek sound?
Oh, yeah.
Because you've seen the kind of the evolution of the Star Wars sound. You have a lot of flutter, but there's a lot of big waves of movement, I think, in Star Trek. I think because there's so much time-space movement going on, the warp speed and that sort of thing. So I think that really, I think, is one of the themes of, I think, Star Trek sound design.
Yeah, I mean, we use, especially for backgrounds, but for kind of key elements too, I tend to call them thrums or throbs.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So the warp cores especially have always done this sort of whoa, 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 Whoa.
It's funny. I created the warp core for Lower Decks, and it's exactly that. Onomatopoeia is exactly it.
Yeah, it's very much a Star Trek feel, that kind of motion to it. And that kind of filter everywhere. It might be faster, it might be slower, but we do try and have that kind of throbbing feeling for things.
Right.
And it's, every time we do a different ship, we have to do a different warp core throb.
Yes, it's true.
It's got to feel like a Federation ship, but it can't be the exact same as this one. And then if you get a Vulcan ship or a Romulan ship, which might be using different warp core technology, you got to figure out how that might sound. There's a lot of fun analysis, the analytical thinking and kind of extrapolating what a physical thing might sound like from this very fantastical science.
Right. And I think it goes to what the analogy of archaeological sound design of Star Trek. So we can go back to these sounds, use them when we need to, but also they can be a framework if it's a variation of a Romulan ship, a Klingon ship. We have a starting basis there that we can work from.
Yeah, at some point they went from photon torpedoes to quantum torpedoes, which still had to feel like photon torpedoes, but couldn't be the exact same sound because then that's just a photon torpedo. Right. In Discovery Season 5, they started to introduce a new version of the warp drive called the Pathway Drive, which was one of the things that I was asking the showrunners, like, how does this technology work? Because that'll affect how we make the sounds. And it's just sort of the next evolution of the warp drive. So how do we do that? How do we make a warp drive that feels like it's based on this thing, but is the next step up? It was actually more of a simplifying things than increasing the complexity of them. Because the idea is, well, it's more efficient now. So it's not putting off as much excess energy as the warp drive might. And that's how it becomes a newer technology. So maybe it doesn't make quite such a huge boom as they warp out, or it's got a little bit of a different tonality to it because it's better. But it's also a prototype, so maybe it doesn't quite get there all the time. That feels like sound engineering to me. Engineering a sound to fit a constructed reality.
One of the great things about working on a franchise like Star Trek is that each episode has an opportunity for them to go someplace that they've never been before, that we've never heard before. Mm-hmm. Maybe, James, you can take this one. How do you start figuring out the ambiences of a new planet?
Again, that has been one of my favorite parts of working on Star Trek. Every episode is different. Where they're going is going to be different in every episode. Ironically, season 5, a lot of it was the Fishers and the multiverse. But throughout the whole series, you're in a different place. So we'll have these spotting sessions with the creator. We'll talk about that. Again, he trusts us to not say, I want to sound exactly like this. He will give us more random words. Oh, this feels like a desolate planet. Or this is where, I think it was in season 2, some of the gods reside here. This is one planet where it's all war-based or it's primitive-based. And so we're able to speak about that during our spotting sessions, and we'll go over each scene, we'll stop, we'll talk about them. I never watch an episode before I spot it with the showrunner because I don't want to have any preconceived ideas. I want us to kind of flow together, offer up some ideas. And the good thing was, I noticed on some shows, like, if they release an animation, they'll start with an animatic and they'll already have a lot of sounds put in. And sometimes they'll get married to those sounds. Mm-hmm. Mike wasn't like that, which is great. They had some iconic sounds and legacy sounds, but he wasn't married to anything. So he allowed us to get as creative as possible, depending on whatever world they're going into next.
It's interesting to me that you specifically don't watch the episode before spotting, because I always feel underprepared if I haven't watched it before we spot. I like to come in with possibly options for the showrunner of, what I was thinking, maybe we could do this, what about that? And it can help with the longer form shows. Star Trek episodes tend to they're not just a 42-minute, 48-minute, they're more 55, 65, 72 minutes sometime. Knowing that something is going to pop up again later, the audience and the characters shouldn't quite know that this thing that they're hearing here has these characteristics later that we're told with the plot. So maybe there's this evil thing, but we don't know that it's evil just yet. It can be helpful to know that kind of stuff ahead of time of just how things are going to relate back and forwards throughout the chronology of the show. And then I can ask the question of, how much do you want to foreshadow that this is an evil entity or mischievous entity or an entity at all? Do we want to even know that it's a thing yet? I like being able to have those questions, but there's no one right way to do it. So I totally understand your methodology.
Like I love to work off my organic reactions, when I'm watching it down. And what is that? Now let's talk about that. I'm getting excited, and we'll have that conversation about whether it's an entity, whether it's, a creature, a different world. I'm immediately hit with, okay, I like that idea. Maybe not in that direction. Let's go in this other direction. It's more about my immediate reaction. I want to be able to just spew it out there for the creator.
That's awesome. Well, guys, thank you very much for talking to me today. As I say, I have no idea how it took me so long to get Star Trek folk on this. What I really love is the idea that you guys are going back into older series and episodes and mining sounds for them. And, 20 years from now, people will be going into your sessions and mining sounds from them to figure that out. And
that's what we're hoping.
Yeah, it's an awesome thing to be part of the long legacy of. And I want to congratulate you both on your Emmy nominations and for just making the Star Trek world continue to evolve and grow. Hopefully we can get you on again to talk about it again sometime soon.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Timothy.
I want to throw out a final call for listeners to submit their field recording stories for our upcoming crowdsourced episode. You only have a day or two left before the August 15th deadline. Full details on how to submit at tonebenderspodcast.com. Sound Idea's highly anticipated mid-year sale has been extended for a limited time. Unlock 50% off on thousands of premium recordings from epic cinematic sounds to authentic ambiences. They're ideal for any creative project. This applies to all Sound Idea's proprietary libraries. With over 45 years of experience, Sound Ideas delivers audio trusted by professionals worldwide. Head over to soundideas.com to learn more. Tonebenders is produced by me, Timothy Muirhead. Theme music is by Jim Guthrie. You can reach me via email through info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow Tonebenders on Instagram to stay on top of new episodes. If you like the show, you can help us out by spreading the word to your friends and colleagues, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click support.